Sponsoring this episode of 50 Shades of Motherhood today is me and myself. So aside from doing this podcast, I also have a business called My Bump to Baby, and My Bump to Baby is one of the UK's leading parenting platforms. I launched My Bump to Baby as a blog back in 2016, and I did this on a shoestring budget. I was on maternity leave and I didn't want to go back to work full time. That's the long and short of it. I learned everything there was to know about blogging, and now thousands of parents visit my website every single day, and I earn an incredible income through my blog as a result. The great thing about blogging is that you can work in your own time and at your own pace, and the sky is literally your limit when it comes to growing your income through blogging. The great thing about blogging is I now can enjoy my life doing whatever I want during the day, and parents are automatically finding my blog through search engines, generating me an income whilst I am busy enjoying life. If you love the idea of launching your own passive income blog, you can access my course in the link below. This is where I share all of my secrets on the blogging formula to success. If you would like access to all of my training, all of my email templates, all of my checklists, my media kits, and so much more, you can click the link below. And if you're ready to start blogging today, you can use the code 50, FIFTY, all in capital letters, for a massive 15% off my course today. I hope to see you over there. Hello everybody, and welcome to 50 Shades of Motherhood episode 2. And today I am talking to my friend Katie Mason, and we are going to be talking all about our own experiences of having a vaginal birth versus a C-section birth, and we want to share our stories around both. Now, this episode is filled with a lot of laughs, but also I do touch a little bit on miscarriages, because I personally experienced one, and my vaginal birth was actually giving birth to those babies that had actually passed away. So I just want to mention that in this intro, because it might mean that you might want to skip this episode. But if not, come along, have a laugh, and let's enjoy this episode together. We would love your comments. Please feel free to share anything with us. Send me in any of your stories and I will share them on my podcast. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello everybody, and welcome to 50 Shades of Motherhood. Today I am with my good friend Katie Mason again, and we're going to be talking all about C-sections and vaginal births, because we've both experienced both, haven't we? And yeah, so with your first, Katie, your son, you had a vaginal birth, didn't you? And
I did.
It was quite an experience.
Sorry, I'm still here. I'm just shutting the door because he's in his bedroom gaming.
Oh yeah, it'll be like, what? I came out my mummy's vagina. George is like, because he knows I had a C-section. He's like, yeah, they'll just cut open her tummy. I told him the other day, I said, some women have babies out of their I didn't say vagina, I said fairy. And he said, what? He looked traumatized, but you know, I didn't know.
Breaking news.
Yeah. But anyhow, so yours, I mean, did you expect it to be a normal kind of procedure, a normal thing? Were you scared about it?
First time around, when I had a vaginal birth, I was like so zen. I was like, I'd read books. I was like, I'm fit, I'm strong, I've eaten organic food. Completely talked myself into the fact that I was like this really, healthy being, and therefore it made so much difference and it would be dead easy for me. But obviously getting a baby out of your vagina is completely different to doing like a workout in the gym or something like that. It was very, very challenging and a lot harder than I expected. I always say to people it did traumatize me, but at the same time, as a woman, you're always aware that anybody that you speak to about giving birth may have to go through that again themselves in the future or for the first time. So you kind of don't want to say, oh my God, it's hideous. You kind of, because everybody does genuinely have a different experience, don't they? I've heard loads of people say it was a doddle for them. They pushed the baby out in 2 hours. But for me, it was really tough.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, actually, it takes me back to when I was pregnant with George, but didn't know. And I was at your house, wasn't I? And I didn't know I
Yeah.
was pregnant. And I actually was talking to Katie about her vaginal birth story. I don't know how we got on this subject because I wasn't trying for a baby. I was due to get married and we were just talking about it. And the funny thing was, when you actually got to the point, about the story, I fainted and I've never fainted in my life. And I
No.
fainted. Do you remember?
Yeah, I was like trying to resuscitate you on the floor. I was like wafting like air over your face, going, come on, Carla, it's
Yeah.
okay.
I know, it was so weird. It was so weird. And me being like, because I've got really bad health anxiety, well, that was it then for me. I was like, there's something seriously wrong with me. I've got hours to live. So off I went to the hospital. Anyway, then I found out I was pregnant. But it was weird that we were talking about a birth
Yeah.
story when it happened.
I actually texted you, didn't I, when you're on your way? And I was like, there's no way you could be pregnant, is there? And you were like, I'll get back to you on that one.
Yeah.
You
Oh
were,
my
weren't you?
God. Well,
Because
yeah.
fainting is a symptom, isn't it, of early pregnancy? Some women do faint in early
Yeah.
pregnancy.
I
Yeah.
know. I think I'd had a cigarette as well because I was a bit of a kind of smoker, social smoker, and I'd had a
Yeah.
cigarette, and I think it must have just gone straight to my head, and
At the
boom,
fresh air.
I was out. I was out for the count.
You
But I
were.
felt like I'd
Yeah,
had
it
a
was so
really good
scary.
night's sleep as well. When you do faint, I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but when I woke, I felt like I was so relaxed in that moment. Anyway,
Just
but
needed to get the faint out your system, and then you were totally chilled and revitalized.
yeah, exactly. Till they told me I was pregnant, I had to tell my mum and dad. And honestly, sex is just, I don't mind talking it with my mum. Obviously, she doesn't share, she's still with my dad. So, like, she doesn't share anything like that. But I don't mind saying, like, oh, this happened. Well, no, not too much of what happened. But with my dad, it was a very, I didn't know how to tell my dad because it was
What, do you
just,
think he still thought you were a virgin?
yeah. And I still pretend I am now. Just like, yeah, I must have rolled in it, Dad. I must have rolled in it.
Yeah,
Definitely
it was
didn't do it. I
complete
did not
accident.
orgasm, I swear. Yeah, I don't know why. It's just been one of those things. But I remember having to tell my mum, and I was like, don't tell Dad. And then I thought, well, of course he's going to know when my stomach grows and a baby comes out that I've done it. But we've
Yeah.
never,
Oh, God,
obviously, we haven't
yeah.
discussed it.
But for you, though, you were about to get married. You planned your wedding, hadn't you?
Yeah,
All the dates were in the diary. Your hen do was planned, and
Amsterdam.
yeah, we were going to Amsterdam for larging it in Amsterdam,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you were pregnant. So it was. I mean, to be honest, you did so well in Amsterdam. You got on with it with the rest of us, and we were all drinking,
Yeah.
and it was a
Oh.
good laugh.
Oh, I had a great time. Do you know what? It was really good actually watching how pissed everyone gets and actually how funny it is. Like when you're sober and you actually see people when they're drunk, because normally you're so drunk yourself that you
Yeah,
don't know what else everyone else is doing. But when you're sober, it's actually really funny
yeah.
to watch. But Katie, tell us a little bit about your vaginal birth story because
Yeah.
I fainted for a reason because it was
Yeah.
a bit
Oh God,
traumatic.
sorry. Yeah, so I had a long labour. I was in labour for, I think it was 24 or 27 hours, I want to say. And actually, for me, that was from when I had my first contraction until I delivered my baby. But when I recently had a C-section and the doctor put the GP consultant, should I say, pulled up my nose, she was like, well, why have you opted for a C-section? Which reasons I'll go into later. But she said, your vaginal birth was fine. And I thought, I nearly fell off my chair. I thought, fine. 27 hours of labour. And she went, no, we don't count. We only count from when you're X amount of centimetres dilated. So in her notes, it looked like I'd been in labour for about 6 hours and given birth. But actually, it started the day before. and I dilated really, really slowly. And just because you've dilated slowly doesn't mean the contractions to get there have been easy. They were painful. I didn't sleep at all, didn't even attempt to sleep that night. I was pacing around. I was on a birthing ball. I had candles. Like I say, I went in with this mindset, I'm totally zen. I'm going to do some sort of hypnobirthing on myself and breathe through it. But I did start off that way. But after a full night of no sleep, no food, a painful contraction every so many minutes, or however it was at first until they got shorter. Yeah, by the morning, I was knackered. I was absolutely knackered. And it got to, I remember we'd gone to the hospital in the evening and they'd said, just go home, deal with the contractions until they're at the point you can't deal with them anymore. So my partner at the time said, shall I just go to bed and get some rest? So I said, yeah, you go to bed and get some rest. And I can't believe he had a full night's sleep, in the 8 hours sleep, in the time I just walked in circles around my front room, because the time went so fast. But then at the same time, I was looking at my phone and thinking, shall I wake him up yet? Shall I wake him up yet? And I remember seeing it and thinking, the time wise, let's just get to 7 a.m. And then I'll wake him up. And I was in that much pain. I got to 7 a.m. I was like, we've got to go. Take me to the hospital quickly.
Did it feel like you were, did it feel like you were opening, if you like, or does it just kind of?
No, to be fair, to me, in that moment, all I could focus on, and this is probably why, I don't know whether it made a difference, but was the pain in my tummy, the contraction pain, which was, it took my breath away. So we got to hospital. I remember this car drive and me going, just slow down over the bumps, be careful, going down these bumpy roads. And we walked in and I gripped onto the desk and sunk to the floor. And I remember this nurse almost going, don't be so dramatic, to me. And I was like, no, I've been up all night. I'm in so much pain. And they actually were almost saying, just go away and come back a bit later on. And I said, no, you've got to look at me. You've got to examine me. I'm in agony. And I'm sure, going back to when they looked, I was only 2 centimeters dilated. I was so deflated. I was like, I've just grafted all night on these contractions, trying to breathe through them, lighting my candles, 2 centimeters. But then they let me stay in. And as my labour progressed, it became evident that I was having really strong, painful contractions and I was dilating so slowly. So it'd be like, an hour and a half. No, you've not dilated anymore.
Oh my God.
Then another hour later, you've dilated 1 more centimetre. It just really dragged on. But also back then, I think you're so susceptible to what your midwife during pregnancy tells you. And that, you've got to remember, is the opinion of one person. And my midwife had said to me, right, we've got to do this birthing plan. And these are the pain relief options that are available to you. But just remember, any pain relief you have will get transferred to the baby. So the baby could come out lethargic, and I was imagining my baby coming out needing to be shaken and, resuscitated.
Oh, goodness.
It was quite naive of me. I should have got more opinions. But this was 13 years ago. We didn't really Google search everything as much as we do now. I actually was reading books on it and stuff. So I flatly refused any pain relief. I said, no, I'm not having any pain relief because it's going to affect my baby. By this time, I wasn't listening really much to what anyone in the room was saying, because I was like, I've got my birth plan, no pain relief. I've come this far, I've worked hard all night.
Yeah.
Birth naturally. The one thing I did have was gas and air, which was a good job, because every contraction, the gas and air went straight to my mouth. And I think I went through 2 full canisters. I remember them wheeling one out and being like, you finished that one. And they're like 1.5 meters off the floor.
You have to just keep going with that stuff though, don't you? Because it's like, it takes a while. It feels like it takes a while to get into your system. And honestly, it was, when I used it, it took a little bit while to get going, but once it was going, it was okay, really.
It was quite effective in the moment for the contraction. But I remember thinking, well, it doesn't do much, and really going for it. And then I think my partner tried a bit when no one was in the room. He was like, oh God, that's strong. And I was like, is it? I can hardly tell I've had anything.
Yeah.
But where the lack of pain relief got mixed up in my head in this process was they wanted to give me a drip to increase the speed of the dilation. And I said, no, 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 no. I've said no pain relief, no chemical intervention, basically.
Oh, gosh.
So I got to 9 centimeters dilated, and that just did not change. And I think I was laboring for like another 2 hours, and they were like, right, we've got to get this baby out, or she's going for a C-section, and you need this drip. So eventually I listened, and they gave me the drip. And then the sensation of this, I can't remember what it's called, the stuff that they put in the drip to increase your dilation, but it was woof within seconds. Like there was like a dragging sensation down my body. I was gripping the bed, and it was, no turning back from there. But to get my son out in the end, it was episiotomy and forceps. So there was a lot of damage done to my body in that time, and a lot of trauma from going through this process and being so totally exhausted by the time I did eventually deliver my son. And then obviously to end up with an episiotomy, which, if anyone doesn't know, that's where they cut you from front to back to get the baby's head out.
I'm clenching my bum cheeks together as we speak. The thought of that, just
so am I. It's just a crazy scenario that we take labour and giving birth for granted, when actually, who in their life goes through 27 hours of pain resulting in someone cutting you open and stitches? It is extreme in any way, shape or form that you look at it. Getting a baby out of your body is an extreme thing, isn't it, to go through, no matter what way you do it. But in the end, as my son was coming through, his head was crowning, and I was pushing with all my might, giving it everything I've got, to the point I was like fainting, passing out. And as soon as the contraction ended, he just sucked back in again. And they were like, no, he's gone back in. And I was like, what? So in the end, the episiotomy and forceps was the only option.
Did they tell you what they were going to do?
I think they did, but you're at that point where you're just like, whatever, because I'm probably going to die. That's how you feel.
Yeah.
You're like,
gosh,
I'm probably going to die, so do what you need to do. I give up now. But obviously, you don't die. You get through it. Your body is made to do that, but it is extremely challenging. And that is why 13 years later, when I came to have my second son, I had lots more to consider, because I had that knowledge of how my body handled it first time round. And like I said earlier, some people have a 2-hour labour, they sit in the bath at home, they go nip to the Vic, and they say it wasn't that bad. And that, I do genuinely believe that happens to some people. But for me, by the time I came to have my second son, I knew that wasn't the case, and I wasn't willing to roll the roulette or roll the dice, should I say, and just see what kind of natural labour I got served up. I wanted to take control of it second time round, which I did. So
yeah, that makes sense. See, I've always been scared of birth. It's terrified me. I think I must have watched a film when I was younger that I really shouldn't have watched. And since then, I mean, I used to have sleepless nights when I was about 7, thinking about how am I going to have kids? Didn't know about C-sections. I mean, this is where probably all this anxiety and worry has been all through my life. But then with George, when I went to my 20-week scan, I was worrying about giving birth, and they said, you've got a low-lying placenta. If it carries on being low-lying, you'll have to have a C-section. I thought, yes. I just couldn't, honestly, the thought of a baby coming out of I don't know whether there's something called tocophobia. And on my other podcast, the My Book to Baby Expert podcast, I've got a lovely lady called Sharon Mustard who talks about that and how you can calm your nerves a little bit. But I genuinely think I must have had that. But I'm scared of a lot of things, aren't I, Katie? Because I'm always frightened of everything. I'm just a wuss. So anyway, so when they said that, I was like, oh, okay. And the C-section, for me, because mine was a bit of a different order, just a trigger warning here. Obviously, with some of you might already know, but I had a miscarriage with twins, and I'd just gone over the time when you could actually have a D&C. So I had to give birth to them. So it was treated as a normal birth. So I'd had George already via C-section. And that was an emergency because I had something called placenta previa, which is where your placenta is low lying. And what can happen is slowly it starts kind of coming away, and I kept having bleeds before my wedding, didn't I? And I was in and out of hospital, and they were like, look, these bleeds could mean that he's going to come at any time, so you need to be close to a hospital. And to be honest, I'd been in and out that many times. Weirdly for me, I wasn't really that worried about it. But one night when luckily I was at a hospital, I woke up and I felt like a bit of blood had come out, but I'd not slept the night before, because I'd been waiting for a bed at the hospital. So I was absolutely exhausted. And I thought, oh, I'm just going to carry on going to sleep. And I thought, no, I better check if it was blood. I was a bit used to blood coming out anyway. As soon as I turned the light on and stepped away from my bed, I just saw red, and I turned round and my bed was covered in red.
Oh, bless
So
you.
I was like, what the hell? Anyway.
Frightening.
And then I started walking towards the reception, and there was blood just pouring out. It was like a flood just pouring out of my fairy. Anyway, I thought I didn't want to wake people up because you know how annoying it is when you're so tired. So I didn't want to press the bell. And I started walking. I thought, this is like literally, I didn't know how much blood I had left in my body after seeing like what had happened. Anyway, the lady came in and she put a spectrum in, and she was like, oh gosh, yes, we need to get you down to theatre straight away. This was about 2:30 in the morning. And when she pulled the spectrum out, oh my God, it just went whoosh, even more blood. I was like, what the hell? Anyway, I started kind of not being with it then. Anyway, Danny managed to get there in time. They used my phone in the lift. There was a lovely girl actually that was really, really supportive during that time. One of the midwives that comes into the surgery room with you. Anyway, so that was all an emergency. And then when he was born not breathing. So, and then he was 33 weeks at the time as well. So he was very early to be born. So I didn't know really what would happen. Anyway, he got whisked straight away to neonatal, and that bonding time between me and him, really, it wasn't there because he was just gone straight away. At the time, even though Blackpool Hospital were really, really good, between the neonatal and the parent on the ward, I was put on a ward with loads of mums that had just had the baby and they're all curdling away. And is that the word, curdling?
No, cooing, I think you mean. Curdling is something completely different.
Right. Well, they weren't doing that then. They were
Curdling with the blood would have made more sense, not with the baby.
Anyway, so I was put on this ward, and I was honestly off my head really with this morphine, but I wanted to be off my head with it because I just felt so traumatized from the whole experience. Probably what you were like. It's traumatizing. Anyway, and I kept looking around thinking, where is he? And I didn't know if he was alive, you see, because there was no communication. Really. So I was thinking, what the hell? Like, where is he? This baby's crying, and I'm thinking, is it mine? And then I think, no, he's gone, and that was in the hours afterwards. And then I was in shock. I know I was in shock because my body does this really weird thing, and it did it with Olivia actually afterwards. So it must be just, but when you're like asleep after you've just had a baby, my body would not let me sleep. It was going like this, my arms, my legs. It was like, it was almost like scared to go to sleep. I don't know if anyone else does that, but
probably all the adrenaline and
it was
some
awful.
of the drugs that they give you during the process and things like that as well.
Oh yeah. So that was frightening. Actually, it was the most frightening time ever, and it actually affected me for years after as well. Like, because I got postnatal depression after that, and then also the bond with George. It was a bit harder to get because when I first met him in the neonatal, I couldn't see his face or anything, and when I first went down, someone else was changing his nappy, and I think in my mind I thought, oh, well, he doesn't need me. He actually could survive without me. And I think from that moment, it sounds really silly, but that's how I felt at the time. I just thought he didn't need me. And there was a distance there where the second time around, obviously with Olivia, I got her straight away, and it was a nicer experience. But in between then, with the twins, actually having to give birth to dead babies was really a weird kind of, because when you're going through a birth or you're going to the hospital and you're taking all your stuff and you're having a baby, yes, you're frightened, but you've got something at the end of it to look forward to, haven't you?
Yeah, there's
Whereas,
hope now, isn't there, as well?
yeah,
And like
where
excitement.
a bit of hope, you've got your first outfit and, all that jazz, all that exciting
Mm,
stuff. But this time it was like, right, you need to come back tomorrow. In fact, it wasn't tomorrow because they couldn't fit me in. So 2 days later. So I had to kind of carry on with life with two babies inside me, go to the
yeah.
shops and things. And people, I was showing them. So people, oh, when you're due. And I was like, oh my
Oh
God.
God,
Like, I
yeah,
just told them the due date and just
yeah,
kind of, I didn't really want to kind of go into it. But, and I carried on working because work is a bit of my sanity place. It's my,
yeah,
my place where I can just switch off and be. So I remember going back to women, who were looking for pregnancy services and things like that. And I was sat there and I was thinking, God, I've got to give birth to these anyway.
yeah.
And then anyway,
How
so
you
when,
get through those days, isn't
oh,
it? Because it's
you,
very real, but very surreal at the same
well,
time.
you
You've
had
got
the
no choice.
same. You had the
Yeah,
same, although yours was a little bit earlier. So luckily, you kind
yeah.
of didn't have to. I mean, it's
Nobody, nobody
awful.
knew I was pregnant when it happened. I hadn't announced it yet. But obviously, I did have a miscarriage, and I had to wait from Thursday to Monday to go in for
Mm.
a D&C. So I kind of get where you're coming from with that. You know that your baby's gone, but it's still inside you, and there's
Oh.
no physical sign of not being pregnant anymore. There was no loss of blood. There was no. It was only because I'd been told on a scan that I knew that there was no hope. But
Mm.
again, you've just got to.
You
You've
still
just got
don't believe
to
it fully though
yeah.
while they're there, do you? You're like,
Well,
yeah.
I was Googling everything. And then there was, I mean, I wasn't being crazy because I knew that what I'd been told, but I was Googling things and there was like people writing statistics like, oh, one in X many thousand diagnosed miscarriages are wrong. Make
Mm,
sure you get it checked again. And I remember
mm,
getting to the hospital for the D&C and saying, are you going to check again just before you do the D&C? And they were like, no, no. And everyone looked at me as though I was insane for asking the question. Like I was somehow convincing myself that it wasn't happening, but
mm.
it was only because I'd seen it on Google that
Well,
I had to ask.
yeah, and that's it. And you do Google the hell out of everything. So when they pulled me into this side room, they were like, yeah, so you'll come back and you'll give birth to them. And I thought, give birth? I said, can I not just have like an operation? No, no, you're a week past that. And I thought, oh my God, that wasn't how, I was that terrified of giving birth anyway. But what they did there, is that obviously because they were already passed away, I was allowed morphine, which
Right,
helped, and
right,
also the gas and air. And then we were
yeah,
putting like kind of this, it's called the Forget Me Not Suite in Blackpool, Victoria. And
yeah,
it's all a really nice little room and everything. And but the birth side of things, it was frightening. But me and Danny are really kind of, we don't talk about farting, trumps, and we don't talk about poo, which you know about.
yeah,
We don't talk about that. So
yeah,
anyway, I knew like they were going to come because my waters just burst at one point. It took about 7 hours to labour, and then when they were going to come, I was like, I didn't know if I needed to trump, so I was like, Danny, can you go out the room? The nurse was like, why do you want him to go out the room? I was like, I might trump. They were like, seriously, are you really that bothered? I was like, I am. Anyway, so in the end,
once
that
you've
was
done it, you can't take it back.
that was, yeah, exactly, that's it. So anyway, so that was my experience, which wasn't really probably a true experience because I was allowed all of these kind of extra
Yeah,
kind of things, but even with those I did find it difficult. I did think to myself, oh my goodness, I don't know how people go through this every day. It is
yeah,
hard, isn't it?
yeah, it's really hard. And any way that you bring your child into the world, it's a miracle, isn't it? And you're
Oh
so
yeah.
happy and relieved at the end when you do get that healthy baby. But I do think like we are in a different world now. You are able to look at facts and look at things that are going on in your life and what you can cope with mentally and physically, and like kind of make more of an informed choice, which I think is a blessing because years and years ago, labour was considered such a high risk event, wasn't it? People did
Mm.
lose their lives on a regular basis. So now we can make informed decisions. And second time round, I opted for a C-section. In the end, Clay was breached, so I probably would have ended up with a C-section anyway. They would have tried to turn him, but because I'd opted for a C-section, they didn't bother. But I had my reasons for that. So one of which was following my vaginal birth, not straight after, several years after, I actually got prolapse.
What is that? If you can.
Well, basically, there's different forms of prolapse. It can be your front or your back vaginal walls where they basically collapse in and start to come down, or it can be your pelvic floor that can prolapse, or your bladder can prolapse, or even your bottom can prolapse. So we're kind of, this is why they encourage us to do pelvic floor exercises, because the pelvic floor is like a hammock holding up all our internal organs and everything else, and it's just a muscle. And when you've been through carrying a baby, obviously, like an elastic band, this muscle can get stretched and be a bit slacker afterwards. And same for your front and back vaginal walls. Personally, I think I'm genetically predispositioned to it because my mum's had surgery and hysterectomies and things like that through having 3 pregnancies when she was younger. So I do think, when I spoke to a specialist, they said you can just have that type of tissue that's a little bit more susceptible to prolapsing. But just veering off onto that tangent of prolapse, because I've had a lot of ladies, when I have ever mentioned it, say, oh my God, I've been told I need surgery. I thought it was really rare. I didn't know there was, what to do. And people don't realise it's quite common. But especially if you've had a vaginal birth and you've pushed your baby out, there's extra trauma there because obviously everything's been stretched and pulled about during the labour. So with prolapse, you can either have surgery to correct it, or depending on the severity of it, you can try and strengthen your pelvic floor and things over time. But if it's gone to a certain point, it's surgery or nothing, So I have had surgery for a front and back vaginal wall prolapse, which worked straight away. I didn't even realize I was prolapsed. It was a surgeon who was it was a gynecologist who was doing a coil, believe it or not, after the coil story. It was a gynecologist who noticed that I was prolapsing, and when he said I was, it made sense because I'd had like sensations of feeling heavy and feeling swollen and things like that down below, which I didn't realise weren't normal. But it's not normal to feel heavy or swollen down below. That is a symptom of obviously your tissues coming down and putting pressure on. So because I'd had that surgery, and it is quite an intense recovery, it's a 6-week recovery, I had the decision, do I have a vaginal birth and potentially have that surgery again, which is a 6-week recovery, or do I just have a C-section, save myself the trauma, and have the 6 weeks recovering from a C-section? So I opted for the latter because my reasons were obviously to preserve my prolapse surgery, because I'd had a traumatic birth, and in the percentage of chance that a traumatic labour can cause autism in children, because my eldest son has autism. So I was very, very intent on making sure my baby entered the world with the least trauma possible, because I didn't want because we forget when we're talking about our birth that the baby is involved in that birth as well. And if they're stuck, if they're starved of oxygen, there's so many risk factors. So because I knew I struggled to give birth the first time, I wasn't going to put the baby at risk by trying to push him out just to say I'd done it myself. So yeah, that was my reasons for having a C-section. But as you know, you can have even just your reason can just be I'm scared. Yeah. I don't think I can cope with it. It's too scary for me. There's loads of reasons, and you do have the choice now, don't you?
Yeah, and I think it's important to share that you do have the choice, because you can feel a bit scared to ask, or if it's a first time pregnancy, you're a bit inferior, aren't you? You don't really know kind of what you can do, what you can't. Whereas the second time you're a bit more firm and you're like, right, this is what I want. And I opted for a C-section, obviously, because had given birth is terrifying for me. So I did that, and I enjoyed it. Do you know, the second time it was such a nice experience, as weird as that sounds, but it was just so calm, and we had a playlist on and we got some great pictures as well, and it was just lovely, really. I'll do it again, minus the after bit today.
Well,
Yeah.
you knew what to expect, and that removes fear, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because you'd done it before, you knew what to expect. I tried to prepare myself as much as I could. Obviously, I'd never had a C-section. I am quite scared of operations, being out of control, somebody else being in control of my life. That does freak me out.
Mm.
And I remember I signed up to, what's it called, Nessa, I think. They did like a preparing you for a C-section thing. And there was videos from surgeons talking you through the procedure, what was going to happen. There was discussion about like what would happen afterwards, how to care for your wound. And I found just that little bit of preparedness, just knowing what to expect, because I've just seen a half an hour video on it. That helped me because I went in frightened of the surgery, but kind of knowing what was going to
And
happen.
probably feeling a bit more in control when you know what to expect as
Yeah,
well. Because last time with Olivia, they rang like a couple of weeks before, which I never got with George because I didn't get that far. And they were like, right, this is what's going to happen on the day. And I was like, wow, that was so useful, because a lot of the things that I thought with George that were like, emergency things because I was going to die, like signing a paper and all of that. Well, they're things that you normally do. I didn't
yeah,
actually know that. I was like, oh my God, I'm
yeah,
signing my life away. But actually,
yeah.
you do have to do it anyway for a C-section, don't you? Because
Of course you do.
it was when they were reading the statistics, like one in so many people. I mean, I'm literally talking like hardly anybody will die. And they're probably from other countries, unfortunately, as well, where, perhaps the medical care isn't quite as good as we've got it here in the UK. But when I read that, I was like to Danny, oh my God, this could be my last coffee. This could be my last thing. Honestly, I am dramatic. But
Well, it does do
actually,
that to your head, though, doesn't it? Because
yeah,
somebody else, like I say, is going to, administer drugs, open you up, all of these things. You think, what if that person does it wrong, makes a mistake?
yeah.
What if my body doesn't handle that? Without being a medical professional yourself, it's very, very. There's so many questions that will always go unanswered, even after you've had the surgery.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but when I went in the room, like you, it did turn out to be, even though I was frightened, it turned out to be a very smooth, calm process. Apart from the bit at the beginning, when you walk in your gown and you're awake, and now I've had surgeries before, but I've always been under anaesthetic. So you walk in and there's all this like busy, organized chaos where they're preparing for this surgery. So you've got the surgeon, you've got all the people helping, the nurses, the anaesthetist, somebody to monitor your oxygen, and they're all like, I remember the surgeon reading off this checklist off this board, like, is this present? Yes, tick. This present,
Yeah.
tick. This, tick. And I'm sat there feeling like this guinea pig, thinking, this is all, they're doing all this to me in a
I
minute.
know.
And I'm awake, watching them like scrub up and wash their hands and roll the sleeves up, sort of thing. And then they administer the epidural, don't they? And
Yeah.
and the feeling of my legs going, and me having to, they were like, slowly lie down. And as I slowly laid down, I thought, oh my God, I could feel this fizzing go down my legs. And then I just couldn't feel them. But you're convinced you can feel them, aren't you? Even though you
Oh,
can't.
yeah. They're like, spray that thing. Can you feel that? Yes, yes, I can. But I think at some points you can. But I honestly, it's a feeling when it goes down your legs like that. It's almost like you've weed yourself. Like
Yeah,
that
that
warmth just
cold,
goes
isn't it?
down. And then when they're flopping you onto the bed and like rolling you around, and you're just like, this is so weird.
Yeah.
It's such
And
a weird
obviously, don't
feeling.
forget you've got a huge bump on your tummy and you probably haven't laid flat on your back for a long, long time. So that in
Yeah.
itself, when they laid me flat on my back, I remember thinking, I can't breathe. Oh my, I can't breathe. And I remember this guy who was monitoring all my stats and my oxygen. And I remember going, I can't breathe. No, I can't breathe. And he was saying, you can breathe. Your oxygen is 100%. I can see it on here. It was like, it's a sensation you get. You're lying down. Your baby's heavy on your lungs. You're not used to that feeling. He was like, I will tell you if your oxygen's changing. Don't worry. And he was really great. That
That's
was
what you
really
need.
reassuring.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, the woman that was at my head, actually, I kept saying, how's my heart rate? How's my heart rate throughout the whole thing? Just because I just wanted to know. And she was like, it's fine, it's fine. I must have done a head in the end, but I just needed that
They've got
constant reassurance that I was going to be okay.
Yeah, they've got to be used to it, haven't they? Because how many scenarios is it where, like I've said, the patient is wide awake, asking you if they can still breathe and this, that, and the other. Normally, the person's fast asleep and they just crack on, don't they? But you're awake and you're having surgery, so it is a very bizarre and surreal scenario, isn't it?
Yeah, it's weird actually, because afterwards, I don't know if they asked you this, but they said like, "Do you want us to check the baby first?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Like,
Yeah, I think
check
you
them
did,
over?" And I said yes, because they
yeah,
didn't, I just didn't want to be alarmed by anything.
yeah.
But then, but when while they were checking her, I was so desperate to get her. I was like, "Oh, is she okay? Is she okay?" I was just like, "Oh,
And you can't move, you're just peering like this, aren't you?
yeah, oh yeah, like, oh yeah." And
I'll tell you what made me laugh. We had this surgeon. She was a lady and she was really tiny. And they probably all do it, but she stood on a stool to do my surgery at the side. They probably all
oh,
do it to reach, don't they? But
yeah.
at the time, I remember thinking, she's standing on a stool because she's really small.
Oh God.
She didn't, like, drop the baby, and
Oh.
it's not too awkward for her and stuff. And you've got the screen up, haven't you? And as she delivered Clay, she held him up, and I've seen pictures that some of our friends have taken. In fact, it might have been yours with
Where
Olivia.
she's like holding
She's
her
holding
up.
the baby up and you've took a photo and you can clearly see the baby's face. So this is what I was expecting. So I'm lying there and I know the surgery's going on, and this lady just goes, "Baby," and disappears. And all I saw was the back of Clay's head covered in blood. And I was going, what? I didn't know what I was looking at. I didn't know if it was a head, a body, like I
An
didn't know if it was
animal.
it was so strange. And I remember going, what, what? And then all of a sudden, Clay gets like taken across the room, like you say, to be checked over. And I'm looking from meters away, thinking, "Oh, it looks like he's okay. Phew." And I remember thinking, "What does he look like? I can't tell."
I
Trying to see
know.
this from afar.
It's so
Um,
weird. Oh,
but
it's
that moment, I had to say to Connor after, "Did that startle you?" And he was like, "Yeah, it did a bit."
yeah, what? Just hanging over. Just the
And
back
then
of his head. Oh
vanished.
God.
But she
Oh
probably
no.
couldn't reach because she was tiny. That's probably as
Oh.
far as she could get, bless her.
It's just so, it was this time around for Olivia, it was just so much different to the first. I mean, yours was probably, did you feel like I mean, afterwards, did you feel like your recovery was, I mean, obviously it takes 6 weeks, but
Yeah.
how
So
did you
yeah, this
feel?
is it's something I asked myself a lot whilst I was recovering from the C-section. Is this better or worse? So bearing in mind I had an episiotomy and stitches, with the vaginal birth, the just not being able to sit down, and that pain in your undercarriage from stitches healing, it
Oh,
did take a long time. And I remember someone saying to me after, say, maybe 4 or 5 weeks, "So will you be getting back to the gym soon?" And I remember thinking, "Are you mental? Like, my down below bit is black and blue. No, I'm not
no.
going. I'm not going back to the gym soon. I'm still very much healing." So even though they say a vaginal birth is a faster recovery, it depends how it goes down at the
Yeah, of
time,
course.
doesn't it?
Well, yeah, of course, because you were
If you've
cut
got
open.
stitches,
Mm.
yeah, it's different. And then with the C-section, I'd had people say to me, "You're not going to be able to sit up by yourself for days. Your partner's going to have to hoist you up just to lift up to have a drink. And you won't be able to hold your baby. You'll have to have him passed to you." So I remember thinking, "Oh God, this recovery is going to be hideous." And then I had the C-section, and I was literally sitting up in the bed myself, just using the bars. I was in hospital for 3 days, so that might have made a bit of a difference because I had the bed with the bars at the side. I just held the bars and pulled myself up, and my tummy muscles didn't feel that much different. Pain wise, that wasn't too bad at all. So I thought, well, this is going a lot smoother than I imagined. The only thing that I felt took a long time was the actual healing of the scar, the incision, should I say. The incision took a long time for me to heal. It definitely wasn't fully healed at 6 weeks, as you
No.
expect.
Yeah.
Um, and I tried to do a little light gym session at 7 weeks, and the corner of my scar started bleeding. So I remember thinking, I'm not ready yet. And I left it another few weeks before I did anything more physical. But yeah, in terms of comparing the two, it's two things that are both intense, isn't it? It's very hard to compare them. If I was to go again, which I'm not going to, but if I was,
Yeah.
I would go C-section, but I would just be a little bit more prepared that that scar, take that incision, for me, some people may heal faster. And I did make a few mistakes, I'll have to admit, with the scar itself that probably prolonged how long it took. But I would go C-section, yeah, out of the
Yeah.
two.
Yeah. A friend of mine, actually, she's done a third C-section. If you think about it, I suppose it's cutting through scarring, because that's what they had to do with mine. They said that my scar had started opening already with Olivia, because I'd obviously stretched so far. So if I did try and have a normal birth, it would have probably ended up in a C-section again, because that had started opening already.
Yeah.
But they did say the scarring, it's quite hard to cut through again for the second
Yeah,
time.
well, they say to you, don't they, when you've had a C-section in your aftercare, what form of contraception are you going to use now? And you're like, what? I've just given birth. Are you joking? I'm not thinking
I'm
about
never
that.
having sex again.
Yeah. But they say it because after a C-section, it's very risky, isn't it, to get pregnant within a year, or the best case scenario, leave it 2 years, they said to me.
Yeah.
So they want to know what you're doing for contraception. And you almost feel like, I felt like we just had to make something up, like I was in trouble. We were like, we're going to use condoms. And I was like,
Yeah, no.
I don't even know what I'm going to do yet.
No,
But
he's getting the snip. He's getting the snip. Yeah,
yeah,
I know.
that's it. But it's just to prevent that scar, isn't it, from not having its proper healing time. Because I suppose I've just said the biggest part was the external incision, which is what I could feel. I genuinely couldn't feel any pain from the inside. Now, I don't know if that's because I was so focused on the scar, but you have got, is it 9 layers of different tissues, muscles, things that you
Yeah.
have to cut through?
7 or 9, something
Yeah,
like
don't
that.
quote me exactly on that. But they have to go through all these different layers to get to the baby. And all those different layers have got to heal and go back to normal, haven't they?
Yeah.
And then for you to go and do it again, that's your choice, isn't it? But not
Yeah.
too soon, otherwise I think you do get problems, don't you?
You do, you do. It's like, it's little things really with the C-section. I mean, it sounds really silly, but you know, like just wearing a dress when that's kind of fitting into your body that you used to be able to wear, you know, that's quite tight, and just having that bit of a pouch type of
Yeah.
thing that
For
can
me,
make you feel a bit.
following the section was knickers. Like I didn't dare, like all my normal thong knickers that I would wear normally all just hit the scar thing. So you buy these granny pants, don't you, that you're just going to use post surgery or whilst you've got pads in or whatever it is. And I just like didn't dare stop wearing the granny
Well, I'm
pants.
still wearing them. Unless I know it's like, oh, it's on the cards tonight, then no, I'm just going to wear those granny pants for the rest
Yeah,
of
because
the
they're
night.
so comfy.
Oh,
And they like
oh,
they come up to your belly button, don't they?
yeah.
And you feel all snug in them. But I did actually, I got some, I think they were sloggy ones, because the ones that I was wearing,
Soggy
like,
ones, did you
you know
say?
that make sloggy?
Oh, I thought you said
It was like from the
some
90s or something.
right, okay. Yeah.
But it's they're really elasticated, almost like gym leggings. So I put them on. They're up to my belly button, but I kind of feel like, you
Oh,
don't look
yeah.
that bad. But then
Yeah.
I've still got, like, the ones that are actual granny pants that are really loose and baggy.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes if they're not clean in the wash, I'll wear those ones. And
Mm.
honestly, I feel sorry for Connor. Like, I wouldn't want to see anyone in them granny pants.
I know, I know. Well, the thing is, I bought some for after the C-section, because you know you have to wear that big thick pad. Like I just
Yeah,
felt like, I don't know, violated with it
yeah,
really, and I hated it last time, and I just didn't like wearing it. So, I bought some period knickers. Don't know if you've ever
yeah,
tried those. Oh my God, they're like huge knickers. They look like it could be a brolly. They're
yeah,
absolutely huge. And I wore those, and they just kind of collect the blood, and
yeah,
then you just throw them in the wash. Well,
yeah.
I honestly, I still wear them sometimes, even if it's not that time of the month, because they are the most comfy pants.
Handy.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. They're
I
just
got some of the
so comfy.
disposable knickers, which I wore at
Oh,
first.
yeah.
Um, and they are 4 C-sections, so they are quite the high waisted, and they're quite, because what you want, believe it or not, like you think you don't, but you want a little bit of pressure, don't you? Because that's
Mm,
helping things flatten back down and the scar sort of
mm,
heal in a flat shape rather than bumpy. So they've just got that elastication in them that just gives you a little bit of pressure. I did hear, I read somewhere about wearing, for C-sections, you can get these bodices that have got like a foam padding. And they use them for tummy tucks and all kinds of surgery, and it's to put compression on your scar and your incision. And I actually spent a lot of money on one of these bodices, and I remember it said wear it from day 3 after your surgery. And I remember thinking, I tried to wear it. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it just didn't feel right. I wore it for a couple of days, and then I was like, I'll come back to that in a few weeks. And it's still sat in my cupboard upstairs. So
yeah, sounds hard work, a bodice to put that on. Sounds like, sounds
well,
good.
it came up to the top of your ribs, and then like your boobs were hanging out, so that you could breastfeed. It was flattening your tummy, and then this foam insert was about that thick, 1.5 inches thick. So I was putting it on, and I was thinking, this is making me look fatter.
Yeah,
Padding. I can't be doing with that right now.
No,
so,
I know.
Yeah,
no, it's funny, isn't it? Afterwards, like, I mean, God, I at Blackpool Vic Hospital. I don't know if it was like this when you left, but I was like, Danny was holding the car seat with the baby, and I was trying to walk out of the hospital, but there was no, I can't remember whether we had to go the long way round because of COVID or something, but getting out of hospital, oh my God, it was like I was shuffling along. He couldn't push me in a wheelchair because I couldn't carry the baby. So it was like I just had to shuffle. It took us so long to get out of there, honestly, that day.
You see all these pictures, don't you, of people carrying, it's like the guy carrying the baby in the car seat. It's the stereotypical picture. Me and Connor laughed about it, and we were like, we're just going to have to do one just so we've got one. But it is really quite cheesy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because behind the camera, the guy's carrying the baby because the woman can hardly move.
I know.
I know it's symbolic, isn't it? The guy's taking his child out into the world.
I know, but you're almost like, hang on a minute. You get the picture. I'm not in the picture. I've just carried this baby for you. Off you go.
And I'm taking the pictures.
So I know. Like he's just like kind of done this amazing thing. You know, really, it is actually quite funny. Actually, just sat there, watched, ate, burped. Walked to the vending machine now and again.
And you can go and do the car park token as well on the way out.
I know.
That's your main
God, it is funny actually, that picture. I do see those. I like them all, but definitely like the mum behind, just about it being able to lift a camera as well. I love taking this of me and the baby.
And the guy's like flexing, isn't he? He's got the car seat. And he's trying to stand in like a macho position.
He's got the tight t-shirt on.
We've got the picture. But like I say, it's a nice moment at the same time, isn't it? It's just cracks me up every time I see one.
It does me. So Katie, I think next time we were going to touch a little bit on like the first after birth and C-section, but I think that's probably for another episode now, because we've gone way over our time. We can really talk. We can really talk.
Me and you.
So next time we're going to talk about firsts after C-sections and vaginal births, because there's a lot of funny stories. Obviously, first sex, first poo, first everything. Peeling that plumbing thing off the C-section as well. That's the first shower, the first wee. Anyway, I could go on. There's a lot.
And also tips for recovery, because we did talk about how these things are hard to recover from. There are things there to help you recover and to help you scar and things like that, which I'm currently in the process of trialing and testing some of these things, so we can perhaps talk about them more.
That would be really helpful. So anyway, we'll leave it there for today, but thank you, and it's been lovely. It's been lovely to have another catch up
again. Yes, it has. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of 50 Shades of Motherhood. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. We'll be back next week with more mum chats, more honest, raw, real, unapologetic, uncensored mum chats, and I can't wait. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. And also, if you did particularly like this one, don't forget to leave us a little review. It really does do us the world of good with our rankings for our podcast. And finally, if you have something that you want to share with either myself or Katie, then please feel free to message us on the links at the bottom of this podcast. Anyway, we look forward to speaking to you next time on 50 Shades of Motherhood. Are you looking for local pregnancy to preschool groups, classes and lessons to go to with your children? If that's the case, head over to www.mybump2baby.com where you can find the latest groups and classes in your local area. As well as that, if you are looking for financial advice, family law advice or a local estate agent, you can also access our family protection and legal directory, www.mybumptobaby.com/family protection legal.